Welcome everyone to our pre-chamber lecture series number 4. Tonight we're talking about the awakening of the consciousness. Are you awake? Each one of us has a notion of being present, of being here. This is common amongst all of us. How many times have you found yourself in your home where you stand up thinking you'll go do something, and as you walk into the next room, you stop and you ask yourself, what was I going to do? How many times have you misplaced your car keys, or your phone, or even your glasses? Maybe they were on your face the entire time. We really have to question this false notion that we are aware or awake. We have to be honest with ourselves if we want to awaken. This is what the Master Samael says. The moment we reach the conclusion that everyone wanders through life while asleep is when we start comprehending the need to awaken. How do you know if you are awake or asleep? Well, a good indicator is how much do you remember from your astral experience? Or how about how much do you recall when you do your retrospection of the day events? Wherever there's a gap of forgetfulness, there is a loss of continuity of awareness. Those were moments that you forgot yourself. Those were moments when you were not aware, where you were identified or fascinated with thoughts, with emotions, sensations, or external events. This is when the consciousness is asleep. When our consciousness is asleep, we are identified. We perceive an impression through our senses. We identify with it, and then we fascinate. In its origin, the word fascinate comes from the Latin root word fascinus, which means enchantment, spell, a charm. From that perspective, when you become fascinated with something, you become under the influence by some charm. It is like the influence of a spell, and you are no longer aware. You're distracted, and you become absorbed negatively in what you are fascinated with. Fascination results in the sleep of the consciousness. So let's give some examples. Some people, they're fascinated with alcohol. They feel it gives them relief from their daily stresses and problems. They may even feel brave or like they can do things that they couldn't do when they're not under the influence. These are all forms of conditioning. Although it may feel pleasant, it has negative consequences. Some people are fascinated with the social scene. They like the feeling of belonging and social acceptance. When at social gatherings, you may become identified and fascinated with the environment, or maybe it is the sound and the beat of the music, or the lively conversations and the numerous crowds of people dancing and singing together. We completely forget ourselves. When the party is over, we're exhausted energetically, or we are completely overstimulated because we couldn't transform the impressions in those moments. Our consciousness is asleep. We didn't observe ourselves. I recall a time when I was a young teenager. I was fascinated with the idea of doing dangerous things. So I climbed a high voltage tower. And thinking back, I could have fallen and gotten seriously injured or even died, just because I was fascinated with the adrenaline rush of danger. Luckily, nothing happened, but we have all seen those crazy videos where people take unnecessary risks like doing backflips off of roofs of buildings or taking selfies in dangerous places where the person ends up falling to their death. And how many people are obsessed nowadays with their physical bodies? They want to reconquer their youth. They want to be desired. They seek plastic surgeries, inject substances in their faces, all for the sake of being beautiful and young. They fear becoming old and obsolete. Or how about those ones who always admire their bodies in the mirrors, taking pictures of themselves in the perfect pose? We become completely enchanted with our bodies. We believe we are the body and spend hours at the gym, not recognizing that all of this is impermanent. The body will inevitably get old, and it will die, but we don't want to accept that reality. There are also businesses who take advantage of this weakness in others. They offer miracle weight loss and bodybuilding supplements that in the commercials say, if you take this product, you'll have a beautiful body like these people. They show you images of happy, beautiful people. Their advertisement is meant to enchant the viewers. They want you to think that if you buy their product, you'll have that body and you always wanted, and you'll be happy, beautiful, and admired by others, like the people in the commercial. These are all lies, and it results in suffering. Some people are obsessed with money, with being rich. They're fascinated with the idea of financial freedom. They want to accumulate as much as possible. Usually their wealth is at the expense of others. They believe this wealth will bring them happiness. When the wealth is gone, like what happened in the Great Depression during the late 1920s, people committed suicide over the loss of money. Sometimes I hear people complain about their job. I ask, what would make you more happy? It was common to hear more money. These poor people made very good money, and every year they received large bonuses and raises. But even with the extra money, their thirst for happiness was never quenched. They were indeed fascinated with the concept of being rich, of having more money, more things, more pleasures. But I could see that it was never really about the money. Their greed was never satisfied. They suffered a lot. Many years ago, I recall another time while I was in Las Vegas. As I exited the hotel, I remember observing the people playing at the slot machines. They were so focused and concentrated. They were completely fascinated, hoping that they were going to win. I left the hotel to go to an event, and when I returned 10 hours later, some of those same people were still sitting there at the same machine, still playing. They were deeply asleep. This may sound strange, but I also met people who are fascinated with being in debt and being poor. They enjoyed speaking about how they don't have any money and how much they suffer because of it. Some people, they're greedy for attention, for energy. The media is constantly filled with these kinds of actors. People say cruel and absurd things in order to move the masses of attention to them. They don't care about who they hurt or the impact of their words. All they care about is your attention, your energy, and that it's being directed towards them. There are some people who are fascinated with physical labor. They believe they have to work hard to be someone. There's a story that comes to my mind about the Master Samael he gave us. He said in the story that there was a man, he had died, and the Master saw him in the astral plane carrying something very heavy. That man was so identified with his hard work in his physical life, even when he died, he continued in his sleep of consciousness, identified to that work, and he continued to do that heavy labor in the astral plane. Parents can become fascinated with their children and their accomplishments. They become fascinated with how they are a star sports athlete or a high academic achiever. Sometimes parents even identify with their children who always seem to be getting into trouble. All of this is the sleep of the consciousness. These fascinations are a means to perpetuate a false self, a false existence that we grasp onto because we do not know our true nature. We don't know who we are, so we grasp onto things, people, sensations, events, and the external as if they are real in order to solidify a self that does not exist. But this always leads to suffering and disappointment. Every night, when the physical body rests, the ego escapes and carries its dreams, its fascinations into the internal worlds. It remains fascinated with the same activities in which the person was involved with during the day. In the same way, the habits that we do during the day, we can repeat them at night in the sleep state. So if we can modify our bad habits that cause fascination and sleep of the consciousness during the day, then at night, when the physical body is resting, we can become more awake in the astral plane. There is a direct correlation between the level of awareness during the day while in the physical body and the level of awareness you have while in the astral plane. If you want to awaken in the astral plane, then you need to create the causes and conditions by remembering your being from moment to moment in the physical plane. We need to be awakened here and now. The Master Samael teaches us methods to awaken the consciousness in the astral plane. One way is to ask yourself the question, am I in the physical plane? You can grab your finger and you can pull it and see if it stretches. Or you can take a little jump, a hop, to see if you float. Do this many times throughout the day. Then at night, while in the astral plane, you'll do the same thing. But instead, your finger may stretch or you will fly. In that moment, you will know that you are in the astral plane. You will awaken. The Master Samael Onvior gives us another key to awaken consciousness, the key of SOL. SOL stands for Subject, Object, Location. This exercise is not an exercise of thinking, but an exercise of perception. This exercise of perception is a means to utilize the power of the consciousness. This means you have to break from your lethargy, the distractions, and dispersed energy, and one-pointedly center the energy. There's a need to develop the permanent center of consciousness. We first need to practice self-observation. Then we can observe ourselves. We need to remove the conditions that causes instability and imbalance. We need to die psychologically within ourselves, those energetic elements that are mistransformed, and redirect that energy properly so that we can develop and fortify that permanent center of consciousness that is centered on being. We need to break the spell of fascination. When under the spell of fascination, have you ever noticed that inner feeling of imbalance? Sometimes it comes in the form of a desire, a craving, an attachment, like to that really good song you just love, or when you finished your day of work, you just want to sit down and surf on the internet and scroll through social media. It gives you a feeling of delight, but when you look a little bit more closely at it, that desire is never satisfied. You just keep repeating the same cycle of events, and that creative energy goes into it, and it leaves you depleted. Look closely at the results of those actions. Does it really contribute to your happiness and the happiness of others? Is it lasting? Other times, it comes as a form of an aversion. You want to avoid something because it makes you uncomfortable. Instead of addressing a concern or problem, you avoid it because you are fearful, and this aversion creates another problem. Sometimes that could have been a simple, but you make it more complicated. The moment you recognize that there is an inner imbalance, that you are under the influence of identification and fascination, you must stop the action and recognize it and invoke your being. Your being is more powerful than any of these influences. You can overcome anything when you remember your being. Pray and invoke your Divine Mother Kundalini. She will help you and she will educate you, but you have to put your faith in your being. So let's go more into depth about the subject, object, location key. The first thing is the consciousness perceives the subject. The subject is the physical vehicle with its senses. It is the body or vehicle that we have been given so that it can exist in this plane. This body carries a creative energy that, when adequately utilized, has the power to transform us. Next is the object. The object is the impression that is perceived by the senses of the body. The object could be something you see. Maybe it's a beautiful woman or a pretty flower or a rainbow. Or maybe it's a corpse or a disturbing image from the news media. Maybe you hear an insult or some harsh words. Whatever the circumstances or events, pleasant or unpleasant, you do not identify to it. It does not mean that you are indifferent or you don't care. Certainly, if you see someone drowning in the water, you take action to pull them to safety. But what I'm trying to say is that when you act, it's with clarity. It's with non-attachment to emotion, to thoughts, or to judgments. These objects are impressions that we must learn to transform. The last is location. As the consciousness perceives the subject and the impressions that are detected by the senses, the consciousness also needs to perceive where this is all happening. We must become aware of where we are. You can ask yourself the question, what is this place I'm in? What am I doing here? Eventually, you'll not have to ask those questions. You'll become aware from moment to moment where you are and what you're doing. It becomes natural. It is a natural function of the consciousness. We all have this ability, but we are heavily conditioned by our bad habits and our fascinations. So we need to become like detectives, and we must learn to comprehend the effect of the interference that is caused by the ego in the human machine. We need to observe how the ego affects our thoughts, how it affects our emotions, how it affects our physical actions. Observe your mannerisms, the way you speak, laugh, walk, eat. Notice how it may change depending on who you're with or in the different environments that you are in. We have to recognize how the ego, the wrong transformation of energy, drains us and steals away our creative energy. Naturally, if we want to awaken consciousness, we need to put an end to all of our bad habits, our vices, our defects, and errors. We need to transform this energy properly and express it as those qualities of the being. To do this, we first need to be aware from moment to moment, to self-observe. When we are aware and observing, then we can stop harmful action. These are actions that produce suffering. These are actions that create disharmony and agitation in our minds and illness in our bodies. We all have direct experience of this. If you are not at peace and living in a state of tranquility right now, then you need to understand what caused that. Everything has its cause. The cause is not external. The cause is how you use your energy from moment to moment. If you are angry because your husband forgot your anniversary, well, it isn't the husband that caused you to lose your serenity. It is the mental, emotional, and physical expression of the psychological aggregate that creates the disharmony in you. You will never be able to control the changing circumstances outside you, but you can control how you respond to them, and that response produces an effect. It produces a result. If you truly want to revolutionize the consciousness, We have to die psychologically. We have to face those parts of us that we love and put an end to them. We need to sacrifice our bad habits, our vices, so that something new can be born in us that produces a more beneficial result for ourselves and for others. If you want to be more patient, then you have to stop being intolerant and angry and practice patience. If you want to be more humble, then you have to eliminate self-importance, pride, and put your faith in your being. Look at the stars and recognize how small you are and how vast the space is. If you want to radiate beauty, then you must cultivate virtue, right expression in your Gnostic garden, in your heart, and in your mind. It is natural that as you work to improve and transform and revolutionize your consciousness, you will face countertransference. For example, some people pray for patience, then they receive all kinds of ordeals that give them the opportunity to cultivate that patience. Then they complain because they were expecting it to be bestowed on them like some boon or a gift from the gods. Welcome the ordeals and see them as a form of training, as an opportunity to express your highest form. There are 4 states of consciousness. The first state is called Icasia, the sleep state. The second state is called Pisis, the waking consciousness. The third state is called Dayanoia, auto-consciousness. And the fourth state is called nous, the objective consciousness. Icasia is the state that is experienced with the consciousness when the consciousness is deeply asleep. This is when the physical body is asleep. The ego sleepwalks and projects its dreams in the molecular region. In the state of Icasia, there is no logic in the dream. The psychic functions work with no direction and no continuity. The second state is Pisis. This is the waking consciousness state. Of these 4 states, Pisis is the most dangerous because the physical body is awake, but the consciousness is somewhere else. It's asleep. People in this state can operate equipment and drive cars while the consciousness is asleep. These activities can lead to collisions and death. How many times have you looked over and have seen people singing in their cars or doing their makeup while driving, or watching a video and texting while driving? It's very dangerous and many collisions and deaths result from this. We need to awaken the consciousness, not just for ourselves, but for others. We must move into the state of auto-consciousness. The third state is Dayanoia. This is the stage at which the practitioner acquires consciousness of self. The key of SOL leads us into the state of Dayanoia. In this state, you are always aware of your actions, your sentiments, your thoughts. You are constantly in the present moment. You can bring this heightened state of awareness as you unfold in the astral plane. The last state is nous, the objective consciousness. This is the state of the masters. Great men like Zoroaster, Jesus, Siddhartha, Quetzalcoatl. This is a state of no dreams, where the consciousness is unified with the innermost. This is where there's harmony with the crown of life. Each one of us has the potential to become a spiritual master in this very life, but we must work with our Divine Mother Kundalini to put to death those defects in us that condition the consciousness and keep us asleep. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Here are the books that we had based this lecture off of, and also the image sources we used. And take care and be well. May all beings be happy, joyful, and at peace. Thank you.